In my ears, engines roaring, roaring, roaring. The horizon's drawing near. Pedal to the floor, no more feet in the door. Gonna drive right out of this bitter night. I'm a constant seeker in converse.
Welcome to Nonprofit Insider. My name is David Unger, and I'm pleased to be hosting a live radio show with the executive directors and key people of our local nonprofits. I myself have worked in the nonprofit world for over 30 years. In those years, I've realized that the majority of the community does not know about the organizations that provide such critical services and benefits to our community that we sometimes take for granted. Nonprofit Insider is a chance to hear about the organizations that touch so many in our community. The opinions expressed on Nonprofit Insider are not necessarily those of WMPG, its staff and underwriters, or of USM. So, our guest today is Nancy Grant. Nancy's the executive director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. Hi, Nancy.
Hey, David.
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
So, here's my pressing question. Did you ride your bike over here?
I definitely did.
Okay. It was a little toasty out there?
It was, but the funny thing was I chose to walk to work this morning, so I didn't have my regular bike. I was thinking I'd just walk down the hill here.
Yeah.
And then I was getting short on time, so I borrowed the shop bike that we have, which is a funny little foldable bike, which is magnificently easy for anybody to ride. However, it doesn't go very fast, and it was adjusted for somebody else's height. So
we're going to have to take a video and post this with on
but
the
it's a
way
great
home.
bike. It's
Okay.
a great bike.
So tell us a little bit about the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, because I'm guessing there's a good group of listeners who probably have never heard of you.
Okay, we are a statewide nonprofit organization that has been working since 1992 to make Maine better for bicycling. And when we say better, we're really talking about making it safer, making it more accessible, making it more mainstream, making it easy, convenient, and something that anybody in Maine can do. In April, we slightly adjusted our mission to recognize that we also do a lot of work for pedestrians. And, you know, in 2015, pedestrians have a lot more in common with bicyclists as a form of transportation and even recreation and fitness as opposed to motor vehicles. So we do a lot of work around pedestrians also.
So when you talk about, I'm guessing you would consider yourself a change agent in some ways.
Absolutely.
What are you trying to change?
So pretty much since the late 1950s and early 60s, transportation has been extremely vehicle-centric. Everything was focused, motor vehicle-centric. Everything was focused on getting as many cars there as fast as they wanted to go and to get as much parking as close to where you needed to be as possible. And a lot of the development of roads and parking places, et cetera, was completely ignored the land use that was going on in the area and completely ignored anybody that wasn't a motor vehicle. So if you were a pedestrian or you were a bicyclist, you had absolutely no priority on the roads, and your safety was really at risk. And so we're trying to get people to think of bicycling and walking as really a great solution to many of the problems that vehicle-centric solution or orientation caused, such as obesity, all kinds of other public health issues, transportation problems like traffic jams and people circling around, trying to look for that parking spot. Environmental issues. If more people in this state and in this country would ride their bike or walk for those short distances, you know, our carbon emissions would be lower. And finally, there's a great economic development opportunity around bicycling and bicycle tourism and bicycling is incredibly affordable. If you can get rid of a car or one of the two cars your family owns, you can save yourself a lot of money.
The people who know me know that I'm an avid rider. I mean, I'm out there as many mornings as I can. How do we begin? I mean, even my close friends, say to me, why don't you go far over on the right-hand side? That's what the shoulder of the road for. But part of the law is that it's 3 feet from where the bicycle rider is safe. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
So if I'm over on the left-hand side because the shoulder's all beat up and cracks and crevices and rocks and nails and stuff, my safe is onto the left of the white line.
Absolutely.
So how do we begin educating the community at large about that there is you need to respect each other on the road?
Well, if there was an easy answer to that one, I think we wouldn't have a problem. And I'll be very honest to say that I think that as our lifestyles become more hurried and everybody is trying to squeeze more into a smaller time, amount of time, and therefore, out on the road, our motorists can often just be going as fast as they possibly can, even when if they would just slow down a little bit, it might be 2 minutes slower. And then you also throw mobile devices into the mix,
Right.
and people are paying less attention to their driving. I feel like in some ways our job got harder.
Yes, no
and
question.
and in fact, you're absolutely right about the fact that sometimes way over to the right is not the safest place, especially if there's a lot of stuff in that shoulder or bike lane or side of the road. And it turns out that if we get way over to the right, people don't see us sometimes. So sometimes bicyclists will purposely get closer to their sort of space on the road, or even squarely in the travel lane, because they want to make sure that they're seen.
Right.
And it isn't necessarily clear to motorists who've never ridden a bicycle why you're doing that.
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
exacerbates our problem.
Yes.
So, we use every strategy we possibly can to try to get people thinking about really sharing the road. And so we have all kinds of education campaigns. And one of the group that we educate is school kids, because they're like little sponges and they'll never forget anything that you tell them, and they're going to be driving cars in 5 years
Right.
or so. We also work with law enforcement to try to make sure that police officers really understand bike laws and are willing to enforce them. We also work with legislators, and unless the governor vetoes it, we have a bill that's been passed by both the Senate and the House this year that is just going to get us one step closer to safer roads for biking and walking. So and then the big one that we're doing all the time is encouraging more people to bicycle, because once you've ridden two wheels on the road and shared it with cars, you're going to be nicer when you get behind
Right.
the wheel the next time.
Absolutely. So you've been with the coalition as the executive director for 4 years,
4.5 years,
and you were the board member before that?
5.5 years.
Okay, so you kind of know the organization.
I do.
What do you think your biggest aha moment was, or has been?
About the mission or about running an organization?
Either or, I'll let you pick.
Well, I think early on, I realized that just because I thought that bikes were one of the greatest inventions in the world and could help solve so many problems, that a lot of people didn't necessarily have that viewpoint. Sometimes you can be so egocentric about your own viewpoint, and it's so obvious to you, and you just assume everybody else agrees with you. And even really nice people who are really good friends of mine don't ride bikes.
Right.
So, trying to convert people is really hard, and trying to make change is incredibly hard. And sometimes you can get discouraged by it. I was down at a conference in D.C. in March, and this woman was saying, This is generational change. We don't make the change in 2 months or 6 months or even 4.5 years. You have to be so patient with that changing culture.
Right, no question. So we're at our midpoint identifier, and at this point in time, I ask the famous trivia question. There's 2 goals to it, to see if you really understand and you get it, or to embarrass you. So
Okay.
you can pick whichever goal you want, okay? And you can tell me afterwards.
Okay.
So I'll ask you the question, and then we'll go to the identifier, and then we'll give you the answer. You ready? What did John Boyd Dunlap invent in 1988 that proved vital to the popularity of bicycles? This is David Unger, host of Nonprofit Insider on WMPG, listener-supported radio at 90.9 and 104.1 FM community radio of Southern Maine and Eastern New Hampshire. Today we have Nancy Grant, Executive Director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, who, by the look on her face, will be totally embarrassed by the answer to the trivia question. The question was, what did John Boyd Dunlap invent in 1988 that proved vital to the popularity of bicycles?
Oh, to the popularity. I was thinking helmet, and then I was thinking, clipless pedals. I think
In 1888?
Oh,
1888.
I'm sorry. I thought you said 1988. Okay.
1888.
Seats?
No, the inflatable tire, Dunlap tires.
Oh, okay.
Well, maybe it's
One of the
Dunlop
things
tires.
I have to say that one of the attributes that I do not possess as the executive director of the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, and which clearly disappoints people, is I am not a gearhead and I am horribly unmechanical. So people ask me these questions and they think I'm going to be like the Wikipedia of bicycling, and I'm not.
Well, the goal was to embarrass you, so I think I did it.
You did.
Okay. So, what has been some of your frustrations of being an executive director of a statewide organization that does advocacy, legislature, direct service, all the above?
So, one of the hard things for me as executive director, especially as we expand, we now have 9 full-time equivalent staff, is that I spend a lot of the day running the organization as opposed to doing the work. And it was really the work and the mission that drew me to the job. And when I spend the day figuring out insurance policies or the tax return or the health insurance for my staff.
Or come on to radio shows.
No, radio show's fun. but things that have absolutely nothing to do with our mission, that's a little disappointing. So that would be one answer. The second thing is that on a daily basis, people contact us and say, can you help me with this? Can you do that for me? I have this great idea. Can't we do it? And there's so many great ideas and there's so many great people to try to help, and you can't do it all. And I feel like especially the first 2 years I tried to do it all, and I absolutely cooked myself because I was just working. I was doing nothing but working. And you have to be selective about choosing what you can do, what you have the resources and capacity to do, because you simply can't do it all. And
Right.
I'd love to do it all.
But you can't.
Yeah. The other thing in Maine that I think can be a challenge is that, there's Portland and Southern Maine, and then there's
The rest of the state.
the rest of the state. And, whether your cutoff is Brunswick or Augusta or Bangor, the perception is sometimes from our members and from other bicyclists in the state that we're not paying any attention there at all. And we really are. And we're trying really hard to be a statewide organization. And even though it may not be visible in very concrete terms to that particular person, it is a very high priority for this organization.
If you had to pick one project, one program, one component of the work that you've done over the years and hang your hat on it, what would it be?
Well, so speaking of representing the whole state, my favorite program is the Community Spokes program. And we started this about 4 years ago, and the program trains and supports and equips local advocates so that they can help make the change in their communities, whether they're up in Fort Kent or whether they're down in Sanford. And we run all-day trainings to get people started. And then we do webinars over the phone. We do a couple of regional get-togethers or trainings every year. But the whole focus is to teach people who are really interested in making their communities more bikeable and more walkable, giving them the tools and the knowledge they need so that we can change Maine one town at a time. And while we have a lot of expertise and experience, and we know tons of people in the state that are really interested in the bike and ped advocacy movement, we don't know the ins and outs of those little towns. We don't know who the movers and the shakers are. We don't know what the big project or goals that are looming over the horizon, whereas the local residents do. So we take, all of the know-how of that local community and the connections of that local community, and we combine it with all of the know-how and networks and experience the Bicycle Coalition of Maine has, and we come up with increased people, network, and efforts on behalf of bicycle advocacy all over the state.
If your doors would close tomorrow, what would happen?
The voice for bicycling would disappear. I had a really fantastic meeting with a larger donor about a month ago, and she one year just started giving us $1,000 a year, sort of out of the blue. And this year she said she would give us $5,000. And I said, all right, well, this is fantastic, and you just made that ask really easy. What is it about my organization that is so compelling to you? And she said, I love to bike. I know we're pushing against, convention. We're trying to change things, and I know the Bicycle Coalition of Maine is always there to be the voice of bicyclists. And if we disappeared, nobody would be bothering the Maine Department of Transportation. Nobody would be communicating with public works directors. Nobody would be talking to legislators about supporting bicycling and walking. And we are doing that on a regular basis.
So if someone else wanted to make a donation to you, how would they do that?
You can that is the easiest task of your day. I'm sure all you have to do is go to bikemaine.org, and in the upper right-hand corner, there's a join button, and it just walks you through, and every donation is helpful to us to help us do this work. We really do work 24/7. The other really important piece of membership is that whenever we're working with legislators, the Maine DOT, decision makers, policy makers, they say, well, how many people are in your organization? And the bigger that number, the more they listen.
No question. Do you have any questions for me?
Well, you work with a lot of nonprofits, and I know you are a bicyclist, but in your world, how visible is the Bicycle Coalition of Maine compared to some other nonprofits in the state?
It's visible to me because I go to bike shops a lot, and I see, but in the general community, I'm not sure, and I'm just being honest.
Yeah, it's fine.
One of the things that really drives me crazy is when we do a fundraising campaign for a client and they say, well, we'll put it on Facebook and we'll put it on our website and everything else, but how do you drive people to those places so people can look at it? I don't see it in the mainstream as I do some other nonprofits, and especially for a statewide organization.
Interesting.
And if I wasn't, I asked a couple of my friends who aren't bike riders, and I said, you were coming on my show. And they said, what's that?
Exactly. And we get a lot of calls from people who think we're a bike shop. And then, I get a lot of blank stares when people ask me what I do, and I say I run a bicycle advocacy nonprofit, and they go, well, what is that?
Right.
And one of our challenges is our issue is not life and death. It's not cancer, it's not hunger. And so I think some people just say, well, this isn't going to be the end of anybody's life if I don't donate here. And I completely appreciate that. The cancer groups and the hunger groups are absolutely on my list of people that I give to. But I think there are other people who say, this group is doing the hard work to try to make this change, and I'm going to support them.
So let's say a donor walks into your office today and says, here's a check for $25,000. What would you do with it?
Well, it's funny that you're asking me that because I had a 2-hour strategizing session with 2 of my staff this morning, specifically on the Community Spokes program. And I said, if somebody said they'd give us $50,000, what would we do for this particular program? And so much work when you're in the uphill climb of change. It's one-on-one conversations. So I would probably hire a half-time person for the Community Spokes program, and I'd put them squarely in Bangor so that they could really serve the northern part of the state.
And does your organization rely a lot on volunteers?
We have over 500 volunteers.
Wow.
We have about 100 at each of 5 events that we run. And for those people who don't know us that well, we run 2 bike swaps, one at USM in Portland and one at University of Maine at Orono. We run the women's ride in Freeport, which was just this last Sunday, and we run the lobster ride and roll in Rockland in July. And we also run the newest bike event in the state, which is a 7-day ride called Bike Maine.
I've heard nothing but great things about
Absolutely. And so we have about 100 volunteers for each of those events, and then we have probably another 50 who help us sometimes once a year, sometimes once a month in the office.
Right. And how much do you have to raise each year? It's just, I'm sure it's going to be a mind-boggling number.
That's really a hard one for me to answer right away because it keeps changing. Our budget is $1.3 million.
And do you get state monies for this?
We get some contracted money from the Maine Department of Transportation and from PACS, which is a regional transportation organization, and the Center for Disease Control. We get a lot of foundations, we get big donations, and we get lots of $35 memberships.
So how many members do you have?
We have about 5,000, and we figure we have about 2,000 households that there's several members in. And that number has been pretty flat. We have some people who've been members for 20 years. We have, some people who joined last year, and they will be loyal for many years. We have, but every time you gain a new member, very often you lose one. So it's a big part of the job is to keep talking to members, engaging them, encouraging them to stay with us.
So if anybody would have a desire to join based on this radio show, somewhere in there mention NPI so we can keep a record to see how many people actually joined from this, and that would be a great statistic to have for other nonprofits.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that is great. Again, you guys do really, really good work. How many miles of trails do you think the state has for bike riding?
Well, so when you say trails, I think of sort of a single track through the woods.
Yes.
And other people think of like the Eastern Prom paved, multi-use, very wide path.
Specific trails for bike riding.
There's some in almost every community, and then it depends on what kind of bicyclist you are. I do not have the number of miles. I'm sorry. We need to finish on a better question.
Okay. And what would you like to tell people to go out and do this weekend?
Ride your bike. It's always fun.
And
take a walk.
Become a member.
Oh, yes, I'm a very bad ED. Yes, please join us.
Okay.
Bikemaine.org, $35 a year membership, and you will learn that there's so much more to biking than you ever knew before.
At least go to the website and learn more about the program.
Yes.
Good. All right. Thank you for being on the show, Nancy. It was great, and hopefully folks learned about you. Next week, we're going to have Kathy Ramsdell. Kathy's the Executive Director of Friends of Casco Bay. The music appears courtesy of Mike Hubbard. You can find Mike's music on www.michaelhubbardmusic.com. Check out Mike's website where he's playing this weekend. Thanks to Deb Danger, NPI's Executive Engineer. You can catch Deb on Morning Street, Fridays at 6:30 a.m. If you know a nonprofit that should be on the show, please email me at npi@davidunger.net, and Nonprofit Insiders now on Facebook. Past shows are archived at www.tcmgr.com, NP Insider tab.
How's Frankie?
Frankie's doing great. Kicking around.
Excellent. WMPG Community Radio is supported by its listeners by Brad's Bike Rental on Peaks Island. It's 4 miles, less than 1 hour to pedal around the island. The natural beauty of peaks and cafes and beaches are accessible by bicycle. Brad's Bike Rental is open 7 days a week from 10 to 6 and can be reached at 776-5631. Stay tuned for Zvuki Rusi, music of Mother Russia and neighboring countries at 1:30. Thanks for listening.